Today is December 2nd, 2025. My name is Anna Portillo. I am a digital humanities intern with Dr. Jason Higgins at Virginia Tech Publishing. And today we are in Blacksburg, Virginia, and we're at the Virginia Tech University Libraries. Joining me for an oral history interview is.
Mark Weber.
Thank you for joining us. This interview is a part of the Pride Stories Oral History Project with LGBTQ alumni from Virginia Tech. Thank you for your willingness to share your story with us today. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Happy to share the stories.
Do I have your consent to record this interview?
You do.
Okay. And then just as a reminder, you do not have to answer any questions that you do not want to. We can stop and start at any time. Feel free to take a break if you need to. And then you'll also have the opportunity to review all materials for your, just to make sure if you want to make any changes, you can make changes.
Greatly appreciated.
Of course. And then do you mind introducing yourself?
I am Mark Weber, marketing management graduate of Virginia Tech, 1987. Attended Virginia Tech from September 82 through March of 1987. I never left Virginia Tech after 87, but that's a long story we might get into. And then I re-engaged with the university in 2012 when I was asked by the university to establish an LGBTQIA plus alumni group.
Mm.
And now they have me. Stuck with me, maybe.
Amazing. And then can you tell me a little bit more about the alumni group that you were asked and like how that came to be? Like how were you asked to do that?
Yeah, I was visiting Virginia, the campus, for a memorial service for somebody who was I'll say an icon in our community here at Virginia Tech. And right after the service, and this is fine with me, some people are like, I can't believe they did that. But the head of the Alumni Association at the time, his name was Tom Tiller, approached me about setting up an alumni group. And I was, I'm like, and all right, I'll do it. And it was really what we wanted to make of it. I think Virginia Tech was, definitely recognizing the value of reaching out to all individuals that participated in university life, and in specifically, the opportunity was there to reach out to the LGBTQIA plus community, and make sure folks know that times have changed and the university had changed. We set up an initial sort of small group and did some planning for what kind of events we might want to do that would engage alum in a meaningful way, because some of the there are disenfranchised alum, there are new alum who don't know they might become disenfranchised, and then there are alum with just absolute broken relationships from the community because their experience here at Virginia Tech was not pleasant, and the day they left is the day they decide they'll never come back. So anyway, we were trying to figure out different ways to engage different alum from different era and different experiences, and we really began what I like to call regular and recurring programming, so that people could expect something and would know that we were going to show up. One of the most, this was after a couple of years, we had a couple of things going on, but one of the most exciting things for me at the time, and I think the year was 2016, Virginia Tech paid for a booth at the Capitol Pride Festival in Washington, D.C. And we set up a team of volunteers to be there all day. And I was dreading it. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to sit here all day just sharing. It's like, I hope people show up, that are supposed to be part of the team. There was no banner, there was nothing, I was like, So I went and bought 2 Virginia Tech flags and binder clipped it to the table. And it was one of the most amazing days of my life. And it became a place for community. People who said they were going to volunteer, they showed up. I don't want to have low expectations, but I was like, this is going to be a long day. But they showed up. People walked up to the booth. They're like, oh my gosh, I had Virginia Tech. I had no idea Virginia Tech was so progressive. And 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 everyone had a story to tell about something that happened to them at Virginia Tech that, and as we're sitting here doing this oral history, I was like, wish I had, the microphone at that time to capture all these, you know, good, I'll say good and bad stories, fond and memories. And, a lot of things happen around the duck pond. I had no idea. But anyway, I digress. But the huge surprise for me, again, because I have a 1980s mindset, even though I never left the university, um, or my engagement with the university, high school students came up to the booth and they were like, I had no idea. I wasn't even considering Virginia Tech as an option. And so we actually took names of potential students, sent them back here to the university for recruitment to reach out, and I'm like, oh wow, high school kids, and and a little play on the wording here, it's like when I was a student, we could be accused of recruiting innocent children into the gay lifestyle. And now here's Virginia Tech paying to recruit students to the university, not a particular lifestyle, but this was a really smart way to reach an audience that had been untapped. So every year since, we've had a presence at Capitol Pride, ex Lapida. Last year, World Pride being an exception for a good reason. We continued every year. In each of those years, we had a reception in advance of Capitol Pride, and this year during World Pride, we had that reception as well. And so it is an opportunity for tech grads to join together, celebrate, commiserate, share their old stories, because this place is full of a lot of ghosts, good and bad, and so anyway, that we have ex Lapida again, Capitol Pride. We do an event usually with like the Career and Professional Development Center, because after all, we're all here to get an education to get jobs, and so individuals have questions about how should I present myself at work? Is there going to be a problem if they find out, I'm trans at work or something like that? So, and that activity actually has evolved over the years. We used to call it Out at Work. Now we call it Bring Yourself to Work. And we want to recognize that, the world is far from perfect, but bringing yourself to work, there might be consequences, there might be benefits, but it's like, make a decision, and an individual is empowered to make that decision for themselves. And if it's your dream of your life to work at a very conservative workplace, know that you've got to manage that workplace. And if it's your dream to work in a very liberal workplace, it's like there's still things an individual needs to think about as they present at work. So having alum who have been there, having an opportunity to interact with current students about their job searching and bringing themselves to work, it's another activity that we really enjoy doing on a regular basis. We always participate in Pride Week here at Virginia Tech, some kind of event, usually the Out at Work thing, or excuse me, Bring Yourself to Work, coincides with that. We have a regular presence now at homecoming in the alumni area. And it's like signing up people, sharing information about ex Lapida Society. We have a regular presence now at Alumni Weekend, and it didn't start that way. It was like, I'll just to tell a little bit of the story. It's like the first year we participated in homecoming. This is one of my Virginia Tech like not happy moments. I was told there will be a tent for you at the Holtzman Center, and and you can have an ex Lapidot have an opportunity to meet with alum and stuff like that. So I was like, great. So I get to Holtzman, no tent, nothing, and I'm like, all right, look, I am not going to be the poor relative at this party. I went to Walmart. I bought my own tent. I bought tables. I bought chairs. Two of those tables are still here in the Pride Center. I think they used them, but anyway, and we sat there and brought a sign from the group at the time, Hokie Pride, and we had a blast. Hokie Bird comes by, and we had a presence, and the again, it was a little bit like Capitol Pride. People were coming up. It was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Everybody has a story. They tell their story. And then there were some alum who just were like not comfortable with our presence. And that's okay too. It's like, and some of them that weren't comfortable would feel compelled to tell their story too, and that's great. And they're welcome. They're welcome to not stop by. They're welcome to come by and say, I'm not comfortable with you being here, or when I was a student, this was something we didn't talk about. Anyway, so it was very interesting in the alumni weekends. And our other regular recurring events, focus around, we try to line it up with university events so that we take advantage of people coming together. So Ex Lapidus Society, that's where we are, and we aspire towards sort of fundraising for the Pride Center, aspire towards scholarships for students, aspire towards, I call it reverse mentorships, because I believe older alum have as much, if not more, to learn from students than students have to learn from older alum. We get set in our ways. And so, but a mentorship type of program. So we have a lot of aspirational goals now, and that's exciting. We're moving forward. We have 2 years of tremendous success, all documented, and we have now our action agenda, we call it, and a planning, and we developed that action agenda in partnership with Virginia Tech, and it is a document of agreed upon goals and projects, and we support each other to achieve those projects. And if we don't achieve the project, it's not a gotcha exercise. It's like, well, why didn't it happen? And it's why didn't alumni show up, or they're just not interested, or the university said they were going to support something and they didn't, So it's us working together around common ground to continue to make sure students, primary reason, have a welcoming environment, an inclusive environment here at Tech, and that alum, if helpful, can be available to continue moving that, creating that environment for students. So that's a little bit of Ex Lapida, and like I said, a lot more to tell, but we'll keep going, and happy to talk more about that or move into another category.
Definitely. I was interested, is Ex Lapida, are there events available for current students to like go to as well? Or is it more focused on just alumni?
Absolutely. I'm like, forgot one. And thanks for the opportunity here to highlight it. So one of the things that Virginia Tech started probably 14 years ago, I should have my dates better in my head, but is the Lavender Ceremony that celebrates LGBTQIA plus graduates, their accomplishments, and launches them into the world. And Ex Lapida is there at that event to receive them into the world. I'm being a little dramatic, but it is true. And we have a party that right there after Lavender, called Year Zero Reunion, where the Alumni Association also celebrates the graduates. And I do my best to always be there to meet and talk with students who have just graduated about their plans, and students are still here, and just to let them know we welcome them into the society. They get a pin, and we tell them how to stay in touch. But life gets busy too after that and finding a job. But a lot of them are ready and willing to try to help with jobs too, and the network. So always encourage students to take advantage of that. So that is one event. And then I was talking about mentioned the Bring Yourself to Work event. Again, it's alum, but working in partnership with students just to have that interaction and experience. And students are always welcome. It's just we're trying. Sometimes you target things to a particular audience, and for the reason of the goal of the event.
Definitely.
Hmm.
That sounds super helpful. Very cool
Hmm.
events. Um, I did have another question. You mentioned that you didn't leave the university. Do you mind telling me that story?
Sure. So, as I said, I graduated in '87, but while I was here, I met an individual that I developed a long-term relationship with, and his father was the dean of the business school at the time, and so I became part of the Sorensen family, and was always part of the university. So I was always coming back to Blacksburg. Um, Relationship ended, after 20 years, as sometimes relationships do. But I was always, felt welcomed, and it was a wonderful experience. So like I said, I never left the university. I was like graduated, brought into a family that was a huge chunk of this university. Um, and then the continuity here was the overlap with creating Ex Lapida. So I'm like,
Right.
I've been, and I think about this a lot. It's like, why do I keep showing up here? And it's like, and that there's another story when I was a student and just becoming more active as a student. I met an individual. Her name is Lucretia Cavan, who worked at the VTU, and and she met me, and we were talking, and she told me this story. So I was like, oh, and I like the story, but she said, when I first met you, do you remember what you said? And I was like, no. And she said, this is not a very friendly place for gay students, and that you were going to change it. And I'm like, I really said that? She goes, yes, you did. And so that's I'm like, so Virginia Tech's been a project for me. Yeah. And through ups and downs. And so again, I and another reason, since I'm on this, but it's like why I keep coming back. When I was a student, the individuals that I engaged with from the university worked, hand in hand with students to support students. And they took risk. They put their careers on the line to work with students. And I call it the change from within. So change from within here is much longer lasting than change imposed from the outside. It's an important thing we come back to. But so many people. Lucretia was one of them who worked with the VTU. A person by the name of Ed Spencer at the time, he was the head of housing. He eventually he was vice president of student affairs, and then sort of vice president of the university. I'm still in touch with him. He lives here in the area in Blacksburg. Um, Joanne Underwood was a student health nurse. She was everyone's crazy aunt. I mean, we loved her. All students loved her across the campus. She would go across campus and give her sex talks, and it's like students love to hear about sex. She was willing to talk about it. And the whole student health center, the counseling center, all of these organizations that were part of the university, really aligned around students and what students needed at the time and supported us. So it's that change from within. And I also, upon reflection, there was a little part of me that's like, label the university as the evil empire. It's like it's one big monolith. And that's not that's not true. It is a big bureaucracy that does a really good job at what it's supposed to do. But there are various people within that create the change. And when I first started here at Virginia Tech in 82, we were excluded. And I would say overtly discriminated against by being excluded. And in fact, the gay student group had been kicked off campus, and not for anything they did. It was just because of who they were. And well, they did do something rather magnificent. It was called Denim Day in 1979, where the student group encouraged everyone who supported gay rights to wear denim on that day. Well, it caused a little bit of a commotion here in 1979 because everyone was wearing denim all the time, and people were worried that if I'm wearing denim, I'm like, they're going to think I am. And so anyway, it caused quite a commotion. The then governor's office apparently got involved and was upset with the university for tolerating such things. And the university just kicked the students off campus. And so anyway, in the early 80s, it was rebuilding. It's like, Denim Day was legendary, but we were fearless. We didn't know what to worry about. So we restarted the student organization. It was called Lambda Horizon at the time. We brought students back on campus. We got funding from the university, which was for the first time, to the best of my knowledge, that we received funding. Some of that funding was used to pay for a phone line that we were voluntarily hosting as students for people to call. Because remember, didn't have internet. This was, you had to know people's phone numbers back in these days. And so we would put ads up around in the dining hall or, on the bulletin boards that still exist today and stuff, tent cards. If you have a question, call this number. And so probably for many people in that era, the most terrifying moment in their life was dialing that number. But that was student run, no support from the university. It was, creating our own community, self-help, and now the university was funding it, and it was like they recognized the value. Also at the time, we were doing an incredible, amazing project around HIV/AIDS education in the 80s that, again, it received national recognition for the work we've done. So now, I'm not saying this is, I feel like our approach to success with the university was to bring positive recognition for what the university was doing, and bringing positive, I'm not, there was a day and time for Denim Day, but bringing that positive recognition for work people were doing here really seemed to break through a lot of the barriers. And so anyway, that was a little bit about the 80s. And I'm trying to remember where your question was. It just got me down that whole little line of thought, but I'm pretty sure it's still coherent.
I think so, yes. I do have a follow-up question.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the HIV/AIDS prevention, thing
Of
that you
course,
put
yes.
together?
So so this was again, HIV/AIDS was a new thing to the world, and people were terrified, and um, you know, misinformation was rampant, and new information was coming along all the time, which was awesome, and when you have new information, you adjust your course. And the student group, Lambda Horizon, formed a partnership with the Student Health Organization, which then grew to a partnership with housing and counseling. You hear the pattern here, Virginia Tech Union, to form our AIDS Education Committee. And one of the things that we did, it was, I think this date I think I got right, early March, I'm going to say March 1st, maybe March 3rd, 1986. We had an AIDS Education Forum here on campus. And the scandal around that is a friend of mine at the time, Keith, and we had gone to Washington, D.C., and we, sounds awful, but it was just like through channels, we found some people with AIDS who were going to come to Virginia Tech and share their lived experience. Well, the big university got a little upset with us for doing this, and because they didn't want us bringing people with AIDS to the campus, and because it would, potentially scare people or infect people, and who knows what they were thinking. So our compromise was to have an ambulance at McBride Hall waiting in case something happened. Okay, so this is, I'm like, things have changed a lot. My point of telling these stories really is, again, how much things have changed, but the people that worked at this university who went out on a limb for students like me and Keith and all of the other hundreds who were part of Lambda Horizon were awesome and amazing. And again, why I believe I keep coming back to this place because of the example they set for me. But regardless, so we had the HIV/AIDS Education Forum, and then we wrote up, how we accomplished it, and it was actually a little booklet. It's actually available in the university special collections. Is how to do HIV/AIDS education on a shoestring budget, and Joanne Underwood, the nurse from the Student Health Center, put her heart and soul into this, and it gained national recognition. Myself, another student, Keith, and Joanne, and some other people from the health center were invited to go to the National College Health Association conference in New Orleans and present on what we had done. And so, we broke through so many barriers with that. And as a student, and I'm going to say this because it's also part of this project for me, as a student, I found a faculty member who was willing to take my passion for like health education, communications, and she worked with me to find a way to get academic credit to explore things that were aligned with the curriculum, not out there goofing around, but aligned with my curriculum, and that I was just passionate about doing. So we were doing, and this actually ended up becoming a field called social marketing. We were doing social marketing, interviewing students, surveys on campus, then, and then the follow-up about how to inform a HIV/AIDS education campaign here. I wrote it up. It became part of my academic credit, and it kept me in an interesting way. It helped me stay focused on things I was passionate about that propelled my entire career. I mean, I can point back to that easily, that moment and my experience here at Virginia Tech that propelled my career And since I'm on it, the capstone of my career was creating the federal public education media campaign on COVID vaccines. And that campaign resulted in almost 60 million shots in arms that would not have happened if the campaign didn't exist. It also resulted in a $90 return on every dollar invested in the campaign and the shots that were given. This is all documented in peer-reviewed journal articles. The other thing that it did, and really proud of it. I don't want to say unintended consequences, but it's only because of the really smart people we had working on it. There was no gap between white, black, and Latino people in terms of the numbers of people who got their COVID vaccine. There was no gap because the smart people, because we know how to communicate, we had the opportunity to do it right and do it well and delivered for the country and the world at a time of crisis. And I'm telling you, it started right here for me at Virginia Tech, walking around this drill field asking students about AIDS and gays. Anyway, I was like, oh, anyway, so yeah, it's really the message how this place can lead to careers and success and stuff like that. But your question was around the HIV/AIDS education efforts. That's a little bit about what happened here. More stories to tell. A fun one I'm thinking of right now. We did tent cards, and on the tent cards for the dining halls, I'm assuming they still have them. But anyway, and one was like on safe sex stuff, and so every time you put a tent card, you had to go through a review. So the dining hall review, whatever it was, and we put our safe sex dining card through. So I get called in to meet with the head of dining services and to explain what is this I'm looking at and why should I approve it to go on dining hall tables. And I remember him saying, "This is not very appetizing."
Oh my gosh.
But with that said, that person listened to us. Even though he didn't think it was appetizing, his opinion, he approved it for distribution. So anyway, I can't remember the name, but anyway, I remember being called in. It's like, oh, here we go again. Got to get a university approval to do what we think is right. But again, we were in an environment and there's a context. So yeah, that's pretty much HIV/AIDS education here on campus. Again, change from within. People who worked at the university, champions for students willing, to go out there and try stuff. Again, my personal alignment with an interest, I was studying marketing management. This is all about marketing. And Julie Ozan was the name of my professor. I want to recognize her for that. And she helped me find a path forward. And I wrote to her after the COVID campaign with the results. I said, look at what you did at Virginia Tech in 1986. So anyway, it was pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. So anyway. Uh-huh. Okay. Well, yeah, it's friendly. Yeah, it's not very friendly too. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Sure. And, upon reflection, I'm very much like, where did this wherewithal come for me to do what I did while I was here? So I, have to give parents, family, community I grew up with credit. I've never really sat down and dissected it, but the first year I was here, pretty much I was very quiet. I'm like, and had, roommates, and I wasn't out at Virginia Tech. I had been out in high school, and so when I came to tech, I was like, oh, I have to go back in the closet. Just new environment, new people. Yeah, I just wasn't that, didn't feel that safe. But when I came back my sophomore year, 82, 84, or yeah, 83, fall of 83, there were no closet doors. And I had a roommate that was awesome. And the guys in, at the time, Lee Hall, Hogue Hall now, fifth floor, 505. They, I can't say they wanted to make my life miserable, but there was torment, and harassment, and but nothing. How it created an oppressive environment, and I have to. I'm trying to be clear here. That's not acceptable. But I never really. I didn't have fear. I don't know why. Other people may have had fear. Um, and you know what? I used to practice of like living well is the best revenge. And because at that point in time I'd begun to engage in the community here at Virginia Tech, our own self-created community. Because remember, Virginia Tech did not support, we were excluded. Very important point. This beautiful community that was self-created here in Blacksburg, and it didn't matter whether you were a student or a local or Italian, it was like, and I had a great time. I had wonderful people around me, creating a sense of safety and belonging, and and there was always still the gossipy kind of stuff and self-destructive, but behaviors that continue to today. But still, we created this community, and so I'm going off to a dinner party, or I'm going off favorite place we would go to Crater Lake, go sailing on the weekends and stuff like that. So these, I don't mean to be sure, so these boys on my hall, they're like, who trying to make me feel bad or harass me, are like, and I didn't realize this was happening at the time, are watching this. They're like, he's having a great time. We're miserable. Yeah, my word, that we're miserable. The end of my sophomore year, they were having a party in their room next to me, and they invited me over, and I was like, this is dangerous. And it was an invitation over where they said, you are welcome here. We have done everything to you to make you miserable, and you're having a better time than us. And they apologized, and they welcomed, and it was just, I mean, I was like, okay, good, and it was just really great. And I'm like, that wasn't the intention, but it was still, I wanted to share. I had my suspicions, but I'm like, let's go for it. And I said, they apologized. They said they felt like, you're having a better time here than any of us. We want you part of our community here. And, again, it's June of 1984, the end of the year when this happened, but that was momentous. And I thank them. I could probably come up with names, but we don't need to do that at this point. But that was really, really cool. And and a message there. I think really a message there is, we create our own communities. Obviously, no one should ever be in a situation where they are fearful, or being threatened. But we do make our own environment in our heads. And so we just, and given folks at that time, and still, I don't, it's not all gone. Just need to be aware of their surroundings and bring themselves to the room. And most people will be welcoming. There's some that not, but most all you will be welcoming. Then maybe a little time. Shouldn't be our burden, but that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. And I'm in that community. I'm still, this is also part of the Virginia Tech thing for me. I'm still connected with most all of them. The oldest is 97. At the time, he was the head of the chemistry department. His name is Luther Bryce. Some of the other alum, Bill Norris and his partner, Bob Wiener, they were here from the 70s. They always sent us money as students, for the student group. It's like, we're going to give you money, organize parties, stuff like that, create that community. And Bill in particular, just as an example, throughout the pandemic, organized these Zoom calls for this community. And coincidentally, it happened really to be all people we met at Virginia Tech over the years. So I'm like, this is like 40 years. And tonight I'm going to go have dinner and drinks with some friends that I met as a student. They were faculty here. I shouldn't say it, every time I go see them now, they're like, I remember when you were in our basement at a party and you've been partying a little too much and you're dancing. And I was like, this kid's never going anywhere. Yeah. He didn't say that, but he's like, it's like, oh my gosh, what a mess. And he's like, now he's like, you made it, and so that community still exists, and that too is very special. And we all have that in our lives. I'm sharing my version of the story, but I think we all have that in our lives as we grow older and move on into different parts of our life. So thanks for mentioning that. And like I said, it's amazing. That group's still really strong today. Many are no longer with us, but that's also part of life. And but yeah, great. Okay. So a lot of it was taunting. I'll never forget one time, because I don't know, I don't know if the dorms are still this way or not, but through the closets, you could reach around into the other person's room.
Oh my gosh.
And one time, like I was gone for the weekend or whatever, and they like opened cans of tuna and shoved it through and all that stuff. I remember this, the cans of tuna, and I'm like, what is this? And well, guess they got the tuna right back, and because the hole goes both ways. And so yeah, it's more a lot of verbal taunting. There was the I don't know, interfering with pleasantness of life through the holes in the closet. Ironic, the terms there. Um, and people would sort of sometimes make up stories of about approaching individuals in an I'll say inappropriate way, but in the environment, well, a lot of stuff happens here on campus, and people are experimenting with who they are and their lives and stuff like that. So again, no one should ever feel uncomfortable, but there's a lot of experimentation that goes on here because of age and human development and the natural course. But then, making up stories that there was coercion, and so that would be what I experienced. I don't ever recall, other stuff that happened. And this too's in the special collection. It's like, so we would write advertisements for the student group for WUVT to be read by the DJs. And of course, we knew a bunch of the DJs because they were part of the club. But and there's one in particular is about Lambda Horizon, and somebody wrote, just like faggots and blah 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 on that, and I'm not reading this, and for some reason I kept that, probably the memory, and and I will say, um, at the time, I really didn't recognize the exclusion here at the university. But upon reflection and my, you know, engagement with the university in different times, I became angry. I was like, and that we had to create our own community. There's a gift to it all, a special something that no other students got to experience. But it's like we were excluded, and that we just wanted to be students, and we weren't allowed to participate, or we had a fear in our head why we couldn't participate, and it's definitely both of that. Um, and again, I'm not sure where inner strength came, but I think now it's called the ring dance. So then it was called Midwinters. So a friend of mine and I were like, we're going to go to Midwinters dance. And so we signed up as a couple. This is 1986. Signed up as a couple, and then because we'd never been, it was like we were excluded. So we sort of didn't know what goes on there, but obviously it must be good. Why would all these other students go? So again, we decided we're going to participate, and and I'll wrap it around the end of your question, but it was like, and we get there and it's like, oh, they have this line of couples getting their picture taken. And so like, okay, we're gonna get our picture taken. So a pride point for me, that picture is in the Pride Center right now of us
Really?
at Midwinter's Dance, 1986, two guys together. And we didn't do anything to try to create a situation, but we did just want to say, we want to go. We want to see what this is all about. Why do all these people go? So the only thing that happened at that event was the stress in our mind of being excluded, showing up, including ourselves where we weren't officially welcome. That doesn't mean 50% of the people in the room didn't care, but the culture and the environment was so much different then. And we got our picture taken. So to talk about specifics, again, words, name calling, allegations of things going on, but it took me really a long time, and it was a result of doing some work with the university around oral histories, to realize 20 years later, I'm mad because this place excluded me. So I wasn't even aware of the exclusion that was happening until I had the opportunity to process it years after. And, you know, it just should have never been that way. But it's not Virginia Tech's fault. The world was the way it is. Um, but Virginia Tech changed from within. I we To wrap up your question, those were the specifics. There was the immediate things that happened, but then there's a long-term impact on the individual of a environment that is repressive. And I don't want to blame the people that were part of that environment, because it takes time for that to change. And Virginia Tech didn't create it. Virginia Tech perpetuated it, but because of people who worked at Virginia Tech, it has changed. So that now we have a lavender ceremony where students are celebrated, from going from exclusion. My channel here, I'm maybe jump to your next topic, but we went from exclusion to tolerated. Okay, they're here. We're going to give them some money. They'll go away. Accepted. All right. Can't do anything. They're here to celebrate it. Lavender ceremony, and so those are my 4 words for the last 40 years of my engagement with Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. Yes. So, I guess in early adolescence, I just knew I was attracted to boys. And it just so happened there was a boy down the street who was realizing the same thing about the same time. And I'm talking 13 years old, junior high. And he and I struck up a relationship in secret. This was all in secret. And then other people I met, I'll say adults, through organized activities, stuff like that, that I'm like, I think this person might be like me. One of them in particular took me to a gay bar in Washington, D.C. And I was still in high school. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So I'm like, I had no idea anything like this existed. Obviously, how would one? We didn't have, remember, TV, and that was it. Radio, no internet. And so the very next day, I called my other 2 friends who were out, again, secretly out. We were out to each other and a couple others. I said, oh my gosh, you won't believe where I went. We're going to have to go tonight. We jumped in my mom's Chevy and drove downtown DC, and I took them to the bar. The rest was history. And at one point in time, it was like my mother asked me, and are you gay? And a lot of drama around it. And I'm not going to lie. And I'm like, yes. And then she was very much like, well, we can't tell your father. And I'm like, okay. And because of their relationship, about a week later, she's like, I can't not tell your father, And so I was like, well, it's my responsibility to tell your father. And, there's a lot of emotion and drama going on in this. I'm sort of, sequencing it out here. And I think I was beginning my junior year here at Tech when this was happening. And I was like, okay, I'm committed to finishing Virginia Tech. And I had the good fortune, my parents were paying for me to come here at Virginia Tech. They paid for school. My extracurriculars were my problem to pay for. And so on the way home from church, I told my father. And his reaction was, it was very, it's like, how did you get messed up with that stuff? Like, it's drugs, I'm like, and even drugs are not like how you get messed up with stuff. There's a lot goes on with an individual's life. And then we sort of had the silent period, and then we moved on with life. And as I said, I was partnering up at that point in time. Richie was welcomed into our home. And it's been a non-issue since. And and my mother, but the other thing with my mom is like, I was very prepared, even because I knew she was going to ask eventually. And I was like, and there's a group called PFLAG, and I had done a lot of research on PFLAG and had this list of books that, and ready to go for my mom. Here's the books, and then let's go to a meeting, and things settled down, and recently I got married,
Wow,
and
congratulations.
he's welcome into the home. I mean, so it's like, and sometimes, and maybe occasionally I wonder too, it's like, it's not really an issue. I'm like, should it be an issue? Do I need to make it an issue? Because I do have friends who like, this should be an issue. You need to make an issue. I'm just, let it alone. We went through all that 40 years ago, and so that's pretty much the story. Knew who I was, the world aligned, and like I said, I haven't really thought about, again, looking back at my behavior as a student, and just, I don't want to use the word fearless, but I'm just like, I'm a student, I'm here to learn, get over it, and that was sometimes with my approach with the university. It's like, we're students, that's it. We want to be like every other student group, and so yeah, I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about where that came from, but so you gotta give it to nurture. And so credit the parents and the way they raised me to, well, yeah, I'll go with something my dad always used to say to me. I don't care what they're doing, I care what you do. And so I'm like, okay. And so yeah, that really is a story. Is not a lot of drama around it, intense for a little bit, and the world moves on. Hmm. And I was prepared. Like I said, that helped,
Yeah.
because if I wasn't prepared, the drama may have gone on a little longer. But anyway,
hmm do you mind telling me a little bit about your parents and your family?
um, and the parents. So let's see. I was born. No, I was born, and just an incredibly loving and supportive family, and I have fun. Sure, it's what do the neighbors kind of think, kind of stuff, but back to what I said to you about my fathers. I don't care what they do. I care what you do. Um, and and you know, it was. I'm struggling. I don't want to use the word normal, but I'll verbalize that. It was typical. Mom, dad, two kids, a dog, suburbs. Um, my parents did not have the opportunity for higher ed. One of my father's goals for his life was to ensure his two kids had the opportunity for higher education. So I was what we call first gen, is whatever the term is now. I was first in the family, and just received continuous support. And so I just, I'm like, there's a lot to tell, but not a lot. There's no strange secret or secret sauce and that I can determine. Um, and you know, I'll, I'll say like you, it's like Northern Virginia. Grew up and graduated from tech and started my career. Sorry, it's simple. I'll try
Not
to
a
think of
problem.
some drama in a minute.
um, I do have a question.
Uh huh.
Did you have any like role models when you were growing up? Early schooling, or up
Oh my
until before?
gosh, good question. Absolutely. And so, interestingly enough, a pattern are teachers as role models. people may have known I was a little different when, I was the one, know, I'll have fun with this. When you watch The Simpsons, there was a kid that always hanged out in the teacher's lounge. The teachers are in there smoking, and the one student. Well, this is me. I was like hanging out in the teacher's lounge. I, let Mark grade papers, kind of stuff. Um, but those individuals were always sort of there and helpful. And in particular, my fifth grade school teacher, named Nancy Bush, became one of my best friends in life. And Nancy, I finally called her Nancy towards the end of her life, but I was like, but she was always Mrs. Bush. Nancy took me under her wing, and I was able to help her with things. I would go and I'd help her with her classrooms and stuff, and she couldn't drive for a vision thing, and so I would drive her when she needed to go places. She would pay me, so it was a way to make money, and she got stuff done. But Nancy would also like, oh, I need to go to the beach for a week. Can you drive me? So I got to experience other things, different families' life, and so Nancy had a huge impact, in particular on what she exposed me to, outside of, be careful here. She never did anything dangerous, but it was like the protective eyes of parents, So we got to experiment a little bit more there. And one night, I said to Nancy, because I was like, I wanted to come out to her, and I said, I need to take you to some place, and we talk, and and took her to this gay strip club in Washington, D.C. called the Lone Star. You remember things like this in your life. And we had a chat, and I've subsequently learned that she and my mother would talk as I was getting older and had more experiences and stuff like that. And so she not only was a mentor to me, she also was a friend with my parents. It's like, so my parents probably knew everything that was going on, but maybe I thought I was pulling off something. But anyway, so yeah, there's Nancy Bush, and then other adults. I mentioned the individual who took me to a gay bar. It's like, I met him. I love riding trains, so I'm like on these train trips, and he was somebody who's a volunteer just like me and working on these trips, excursions, and having him as a safe person. I mean, this is the other part. These are safe people that my parents trusted, for him to take me to a bar, and be there. And it wasn't just me wandering in kind of stuff. Those days happened soon after, but but so yes, adults. The vast majority of mentors, including ones, again, Virginia Tech, teachers, faculty, adult friends who allowed me to explore beyond my home base in a safe way, was incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you start. I always live like trains, and so I chalk that back to my parents grew up in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's similar to Roanoke, big railroad center in the U.S. at the time, and so every time we'd visit family, they would take me to this place called the Horseshoe Curve, and you go watch trains and stuff like that, and a favorite picture of one of my childhood pictures, my grandfather and he and I are at this horseshoe curve. I'm probably 3 years old, and we're like watching trains. So there is that hobby that through that network, and I've met people, and it is sort of an ultimate, I would say, a relaxing space for whatever people find is great, and that's something that I've just always enjoyed, and it leads to travel in very different places that you not normally would have gone to, and small towns, and so it expands opportunities to go to different places. Um, so I'll say a natural extension of that is travel, which, now that I'm retired, have more time, I can take advantage of that and go places that I've been wanting to go or want to go back to. And somehow a lot of it revolves around a train trip.
Hmm.
But anyway, so it's, again, common themes. And not that well, I do think about this. You see these common themes run through, again, all of our lives for the most part, and they shape our lives and the people that shape our lives and stuff like that. But yep, trains and travel.
Mm. Would you say, are there any specific places that, again, you spoke about not expecting to go, or like wouldn't normally go if you were not traveling through trains, that you found were significant?
Say that again.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I'm sorry about that.
that's okay.
Um, do you have any memories of traveling somewhere new
Uh-huh.
that were significant to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Here's it. It relates to all of the above. So a a dear friend of mine, Juan Carlos, wanted to go somewhere for his birthday. And there's stuff around this. And he's like, Mark, where are we gonna go? Oh my God. He's like, I want to go to Egypt and see the pyramids. I want to go, some kind of big trip. So online internet research. No, we're in the days of internet now. Um, and I saw this place. It's called, the Riviera Maya in Mexico. I was like, oh. And the thing that drew me in on going to the Riviera Maya was, said Straits have been enjoying this area for years, and now the gays are discovering it. And I was like, oh, this sounds. I'm like, what is this? And so I'm like, well, let's go to this Riviera Maya place. And the irony of this. So I was like, well, I really can't find Riviera Maya, but there's like this town, Playa del Carmen, seems to be in the middle of it. So found this hotel, found this package deal. Let's go there for your birthday. Okay, great. So I'd been to Mexico before, and prior to this, I'd done international travel mostly for work, but really this was sort of a first out of the country. I don't want to say Canada doesn't count, but Mexico's different culture, whole different situation. So we go to Playa del Carmen, get a rental car. I'm like, ooh, we're in Mexico, blah, 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 And it was that trip. That's where I met my husband
Wow.
for his birthday.
Oh,
So
wow.
this was now 10 years ago.
Mm.
And the husband also named Juan Carlos,
Really?
which has caused a lot of confusion in my life. But anyway, I met, well, the joke is I said old Juan Carlos and young Juan Carlos. Old Juan Carlos didn't like being called old Juan Carlos, so we have young Juan Carlos and younger Juan Carlos to zip them up. So yes, your question about travel, sort of why my friend and I picked this place, and it was like, it was new and exciting, and let's explore, and we got to do everything, and unexpected out of the blue, I meet this person and it's like, and when are you coming back? And I was like, oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll come back. So now, about 2 months ago, I bought a condo in Playa del Carmen. So I'm now own property in Mexico. I mean, this is like not, thank God, every trip doesn't turn out this way.
Mm.
Life would be very complicated. but it was like, so that was an example of just sort of unexpected, enjoying the moment, because oh, you may not believe this. I'm very protected.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm like I like to know all the answers before I ask the question. And so anyway, so yeah, but now it's like I love going down there, and you know, now I understand Riviera Maya is a zone. It's not a city. And I
Oh,
was
I
just like I
see.
was thinking it was a city.
You're
So
like, I can't really find this place.
and and I'll share also in the travel context. I haven't, I for work, and I have traveled to Russia, Moscow, St. Petersburg, at a different time. I spent time in Afghanistan during the U.S. Um, occupation. That's not quite the right word I want to use, but the U.S. engagement in Afghanistan, uh, Jordan, Middle East, around working with the Iraqi government, and the topic on all of this was mental health and substance use was a part of my career, uh, focused on that space. And it's just really fascinating to me going to these places that, you know, I'll say one might not equate Iraq and Afghanistan with mental health, but as the people there were rebuilding their government, they made that a priority. And they made it a priority in a time, getting way into the whole other stuff, but here at a time at the United States where there wasn't even parity in health insurance coverage for mental health and substance use disorders. It wasn't, and these countries that were rebuilding from the ground up, they're like priority is. So I was the director of communications for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration from September of 1995 through January 2011, and part of that involved this international travel. Same thing with Colombia, South America. When I always got to go to these places that were a little dangerous. When I went to Colombia, the country was in the middle of its civil war. Where the briefings by the military, I'm sitting in their equivalent of the Pentagon, and they're telling us they only control 40% of the country, and I'm like, why am I here? I was like, I need to be on the 60% side, but experience, and it's like the people that I met. That's why there's so much more good in this world than bad, and the point of, you asked about travel, the one big surprise, but having the opportunity to go to some very difficult places in this world and meet people, I'm just like, this oversimplified. What you see on TV oversimplifies things, and they're struggling to survive, just like you and me. We probably not struggling as much, um, and it absolutely incredible meeting folks from around the world and engaging, and bottom line, we all want the same thing, a little bit of beauty, a little bit of happiness, and food on our table and family, and it has nothing to do with any of this other stuff we're talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you mind me sorry. Do
Oh,
you
go
mind
ahead.
telling
You keep. Let's see if you can get me. No, I'm joking. Yes, absolutely.
Do you mind telling me a story about some of the good people that you met during your travels that you learned a lot from?
I'm gonna reiterate that in general, people focus on common things that we all need to survive, and it's I'd be a little um, cliche about it. It starts with food, clothing, and shelter, and then you move up the hierarchy. But one of the things that I really appreciated, and I'm gonna go with Mexico, and and Juan Carlos's family. Um, and this isn't perfect, but it's like Mexico is a lot like the United States was 50 years ago. I can, 'cause I was alive 50 years ago and experienced it, and where people were, and living and lifestyles, and not everybody goes to college, and it's like it was more of a, I don't want to undersell because it's still tough in the U.S. today, but but what I really appreciate is that people that working hard to make a living, and seeing that and recognizing how different we have it in the US in general. But as you delve into the United States, people are having a hard time making ends meet. And whether you have, cable TV, a home with heating and air conditioning, and food on your table versus none of those things, it's still the same, trying to make things ends meet, and life is tough. And for all of us, I'm just like the vast majority of us. How about that? And and by, you know having the good fortune and the opportunity to immerse myself in families and the culture in Mexico, I've grown to appreciate how tough it is in this world to make it here and there, and how different peoples have, found their path, and and I want to say how fortunate I have been, but I also want to say I've worked for everything I've done. I'm like, I don't want to, the dollar bills didn't fall out of the sky. Um, I joke that, you know, people say, "Oh, you're so lucky to retire." I'm like, well, it was after 32 dog years at HHS that I loved, but it's like, uh, so yeah. I'm trying to think of a. It's more of a general answer for you, just because it is an environmental experience, and I really can't point to like one person or one event, because it is a confluence of life.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be cliche about it or whatever, but I'm having a hard time that one experience,
Hmm.
or a special story, and it helps it has helped me appreciate what we have here in the United States, as well as appreciate how hard people work for, almost like I said, the same things. And you just might be in a different place around what you're working for, to get through day to day, and maybe plan for a day ahead. That's the other another part of it. It's like, you know, I'm I'm looking I personally am looking at my next 20 years. How do I figure this out? And I also know tomorrow's not guaranteed, but when you're hungry, you worry about today, and how you're not really worried about tomorrow. You're not worried about the 401k continuing to go up for 20 years, so that my dig, I can donate money to Virginia Tech when I die. But so it's like, but that's a serious thing for me. It's like, that is where I'm looking, but other folks are just, again, getting through day by day. And so that is my, and I've just loved the experience of, in Mexico, going back in time of my own life, because I can remember 50 years ago, um, and seeing, just the nieces and nephews. It's because they're now the first ones who are going to college, and that is unheard of. It's like it's few and far between, and I'm like, but there's also the ones who are working in the kitchens, preparing 1,000 meals for tourists from around the world who are coming to experience the beauty of the coast of Mexico there. And they've chosen different paths. And I'm not struggling, but I'm just like, I want to reward each. It's like I don't want the college ones to be more special than the ones who are working in the kitchen, but and to see, you're getting to my story. You're getting. Sorry, I'm burning time on this, but I'm just like, and the thing that I think is really creating that change is digital technology. So the younger kids, young adults, they're seeing the world on their phone. And I'm joking. They find money for phones, and so, and this when I hear, oh well, they don't have access to phones. I'm like, believe me, people have access to phones. Don't. That's I think that's a misconception, but that's they're into the world, and they see what's possible, and that's opening up the possibilities in a country. Again, I don't want to say I know a lot about, but have been experiencing, and I'm like, this is awesome to be part of this. So specific people, I'm going to go as an example, the nieces and nephews, some choosing to go to college and having that opportunity, which was non existent 5 to 10 years ago. The ones choosing to go into the tourism industry, obviously I've got some in my mind working in the kitchens, feeding the thousands, and having, and I don't know Spanish, like, but having the opportunity to see that and share that with them is really, really a special, like, individual story that I would tell. So I've ranged from Afghanistan to young people in Mexico discovering the world because of technology. And a point, I believe technology is good. It can be used in very bad ways, but overall, it's amazing to see what that technology has done for opening minds and ideas. Wow, that was a lot.
I appreciate that.
Okay. I was like, I'm like, why is my one example? I'm like, because usually if you can't tell, I come up with stories about things and whatever. And that one, that was a tough one.
Thank you for answering it. Okay. Do you mind telling me how you got involved with mental health, with your job?
So I'll do a quick career overview. When I left Virginia Tech, this is a story that I like to tell. I remember my last class was in the War Memorial Gym, and I took my last final, and I remember walking towards this building. There's Carol on the sidewalk, and I'm like, I want to get out of this health stuff. I'm like, I am never going back to school. I said health, and I'm not working for the government because the government was the evil empire. I was burnt out, and I just needed something different. Well, anyway, I ended up doing all three, and I've reassessed, and I'm like, still don't know what the psychology mechanism is here, where I was really predicting my future. Because I think we all know our future. I said I was talking about common themes and things that happen and project. But anyway, so that's what I was not going to do. So after screwing around a little and then getting bored, I started looking in the Washington Post one ads, again, pre-internet days, and I found this job advertisement. It was looking for a HIV/AIDS program assistant, and the project was focused on HIV/AIDS prevention for adolescents, high school, college. I'm like, oh, I know something about that. So I applied. My my extracurricular activity, which was supported by academic endeavors here at Tech, got me my first job. And so I went to work on this program. It was a cooperative agreement with the Centers for Disease Control. I met people at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as a result of the job. The CDC is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And they said, will you come work for us? I'm like, oh, never working for the government. You're the evil empire. Will you pay for me to go to school? Yes, we'll pay for you to go to school. I'm like, all right, I can work for the evil empire for 5 years if I can get to school. And so I went over to the Department of Health and Human Services, and it wasn't immediately my first job, but it ended up being my first job as a speechwriter for the Assistant Secretary for Health. And the first speech I ever wrote was on HIV/AIDS immigration policy in the U.S. And it was for a nice audience, the World Hemophilia Foundation, versus maybe a not so nice audience. It's again different times, and so I wrote this speech. I volunteered to do it. I was like, oh, I'll do that because no one was around to do it. The next thing I know, I'm writing speeches. So wrote speeches, and then reinventing government came along. Al Gore, which was a real reinventing government, and my job disappeared, and I was recruited to become the director of communications for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. This was 1995. And I went into that job as a government bureaucrat, and I left as an advocate. Amazing people. The boss that recruited me, her name is Nelba Chavez. Absolutely another mentor, still in contact with her. Really, I think she set the foundation for my trip to Playa del Carmen 30 years later, but well, I give her credit for that. Whether she deserves it or not, I don't know. No, but no, she deserves it. So Nelba was absolutely awesome, gave me tremendous opportunities to grow and explore. And yeah, I'm talking about government jobs, grow and explore in a government job. The person who came in after her this was the Clinton administration, then the second Bush administration, a gentleman by the name of Charlie Curie. Again, oh my gosh, I couldn't have had a better boss, opportunities to grow and explore. And both of them were the ones that created these opportunities for the travel I mentioned earlier. But they also created the opportunity for me to make networks around the country, community anti-drug coalitions, mental health advocates. And like I said, I entered the job as a bureaucrat. I left as an advocate because I truly believe if the U.S., probably the world, if we were to really invest in behavioral health issues in the way that needs to be done, we could solve 90% of all the other problems, and because we all have a little bit of behavioral health stuff going on in our lives, and some also it's just is very serious, debilitating, and if we could address those issues. So I was there for about 16 years, and then I was recruited to go to become the director of communications at the Centers for Disease Control. It's a full circle here. And I was wrapping up the interview process for that job when I got another phone call saying, would you instead come to the secretary of HHS's office and be sort of the career communications deputy for the entire department? And I'm like, that's the only reason why I go to CDC is to get that job. I said, if I can skip that step, I don't want to move to Atlanta, but CDC is an awesome prize. So then for the last 10 years of my career, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So my engagement with mental health and substance use disorder really evolved while I was working at SAMHSA, again, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. one of my one of my many pride points was one of the people who helped create the suicide prevention national lifeline. And one of the last, and sort of creating is it's called the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention. We stood up at the time, it was 1-800-273-TALK. It was and brought all the hotlines that were across the country together into one number. And as I was heading out the door, when I was in the secretary's office, helped facilitate the beginning of the changeover to 988, and millions of lives saved as a result of that. That is the power of your government. I mean, sometimes we feel the power in other ways, but it's like this is the power of government. Again, working with people and partners and things like that. So yeah, SAMHSA, one of my many pride points there. And then at the U.S. in the office of the secretary, I had a capstone, and I mentioned that before, and then another project that I just absolutely loved, hated the reason, but spent an incredible amount of time on the border working with the programs that supported the children that crossed the border without their parents. I was there when the family separation happened during the first Trump administration. It was an abhorrent policy of the U.S. government, but I also was part of the solution. Worked with the team that got the families back together, while caring for thousands of kids in shelters and finding safe homes for them while they went through their immigration process. I say just an absolute difficult situation for everyone. It's like difficult for the families making the decision, because most families made the decision to send kids. Difficult for the U.S. government, because we do have borders and there are laws for reasons. And once these kids are here, we need to take care of them. And then finding sponsors, and the adjudication process, and no matter what folks say, the main thing that has fueled the recent surges at the border is the cartels, because they found a way to make money, and so families would be extorted, 2-for-1 trips to the border with here's the right words to say, we're offered, and so it's this whole, again, cartel, organized extortion. It is just bad for everybody, and so impossible problem. This is why I loved it, I guess. It's like, but one at a time, with kids, and I would go and stay in the shelters for the kids. That was truly, again, vast majority of people in this world are good and kind, and the resources I saw, and our government still continues to dedicate to those kids. I'm glad there are fewer coming. I'm glad the cartels are not able to make as much money. I hope families are finding other ways to cope in their home countries. But anyway, that was fascinating, and I miss that work, but it's difficult that we have to do it. And then the second capstone class, which I mentioned earlier, is the COVID public education campaign, where again, we brought together incredibly smart people, almost 60 million shots in arms, closed gaps between Black, white, Latino, and got a return on investment for the government. I was tired. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
and so the question about mental health, and that's how I got into it. I also, delving into family issues. All families have individuals with mental and substance use disorder issues, and Mine's not, didn't didn't miss that genetic pool, and so it was more subsequent to that work that I learned more because when one can have a conversation that, let's start with non-judgmental, then informed, people feel more comfortable sharing. So anyway, that's that that is how I got into that mental health stuff.
Thank you. Um, so I know you mentioned that you said if only we could fund, um, I believe,
Mental health, behavioral
yes,
health is
mental
sort of
behavioral health.
new term.
Mm-hmm. What steps do you think that we would need to take at the government level to help better support?
Mental and substance use disorders. So, there's a rational approach, and then there's the way things get done.
Mm-hmm.
And the way things get done in this country, unfortunately, is there's a crisis.
Mm.
So, so when you hear people talking about mental health, substance use disorders, it's usually around a crisis, right? And I'm going to go, and Virginia Tech is part of this. We'll go back to, I don't want to say the very beginning, but a change in our environment, and that was the Columbine school shooting. That that was a watershed event where there was a recognition of the role mental wellness, mental health can play in an individual's development. And I want to be really clear, mental illness and violence should not, I'm not making them the same thing here. It is just it, but in the preventive mode, and in this country, and Virginia Tech included as part of this, created around school-based mental health programs. But you know, say this Columbine happened, Virginia Tech happens, a bunch of other things happen, people move on, whatever. So this is when, when attention is there is an opportunity. Um, it takes the willingness of Congress at the federal level, to make big changes. And funding is part of the issue, but the other part of the issue is using the funding that exists in a more effective and an efficient way. So I have a guiding principle. People just say, "Oh, we need more money or we need more staff." I've heard that a lot in my life. And I'm like, "Well, what are you doing with the money you currently have? Or what do all these people that work here, what are they currently doing?" And and I believe, before I get the answer, they're doing the best they can with what they have and the information they know. So I'm like always try to approach things like that. But so we really need to look at who's working in this space and how those dollars are being used before I would say put another $1 billion there and whatever the price tag is. The other thing that I think we as a country are missing out on, and I think we have an opportunity here where the answer is in our face to help justify those resources. I'm going to go back to 988. There is an immediate feedback loop involved in that. So 988 can help you with your immediate situation, but it also creates a pathway into some kind of service. And unfortunately, that service is not always available. So people show up in crisis, they end up in a hospital, emergency room, which is not the best place for them, but it's where they go. So taking the data out of 988 really could help states, because states run this in the US, states justify what they need to build that system that really could begin to address mental health promotion, the treatment of mental illness. And, I mentioned Charlie Curie earlier, but he is a huge mentor. Yeah, all these people are mentors. Um, and the concept of recovery. So, um, the expectation with appropriate care and support is recovery. It's not an exception, it's the expectation based on what we know now in this country. So if I were given the magic wand and, a project back in HHS, I think around mental health, which this is a noble project. I was like, this sounds interesting. Um, I'd like to start working with states around collecting, capturing, analyzing the data that comes from people calling 988 to see what happens. And part of the reason why it's not happening now is because the system fails. And when the system fails, the state's failing the way it's set up in this country, so states in general don't want to see a lot of failure. So there's a fear of getting information that really, in my mind, like I said, with my magic wand, um, is it? I'll go with Glenda. My Glenda wand versus the broom, but broom's good too. Um, that's what I would do. I would because it's not just we need more money or we need more people. We do need more money and we need more people and types of people, but before Mark Weber would advocate that I want some data to show how we can move forward and document for people who are paying themselves or for the government who's paying what they're getting for their money. That just spending more and hiring people that that ends up big bureaucracies that have good intentions, accomplish a lot of good things, but it really doesn't maximize, in my experience, 60 million shots in arms with a 90-to-1 return on investment. And again, colorblind, if you will. And I'm not saying everything has to be a return on investment, but society has to agree upon a common goal. And if I had my magic wand, I want to show people the results, because if all that money being spent isn't producing results that are desired, I don't want to keep doing it, which happens. And I want to celebrate people who bring problems forward so that you can stop doing things that aren't working. And too often people are afraid to bring forward problems, and people get used to doing things in a certain way. I am personally a creature of habit, but so anyway, yes, thank you for that magic wand. That's how I would approach it. And as I was approaching it that way, I would be talking to a lot of people who are smarter than me so that they can say, and as you're going that way, make sure you check over here and make sure you check here. And here's the coalition you need to build around this to maintain momentum. Yeah, that was a good thought exercise. Appreciate that.
For the COVID project that you worked on, what strategies did you use or were trying to put in place that you think helped make it so successful?
Great question. So a public facing key was identifying, I learned this here, over there in Pamplin, I'm one of those classrooms, the target audience and what resonated with that target audience. Because too often people give a message to everybody. And I'm like, no. That's it. I'm like, I get it. It feels good. It's really hard to exclude people. But there are, and this is not how it totally actually broke out, but for illustration purposes, a third of the country, they're waiting in line to get the shot. They want the shot. The government could say, don't get the shot, and they still want the shot. So I don't need to tell them anything. A third of the country, no matter what you tell me, I am not getting the shot. That doesn't mean you can't find a way to engage them around getting the shot, but a media message is not going to do it, a media message alone. But then there was this big chunk of people, which I labeled the movable middle, who were questioning the shot. Should I get it? I think I want to, but I'm just not sure. So we directed our advertising at those people, not the ones who were going to get it, not the ones who, just weren't going to respond to media campaign alone. So we focused on I wrote them off. I mean, that was horrible, but it's just not what this tool is going to do. Set step one. And again, having really, really smart people around then, once you've targeted that group, who know how to message to American Indian, Alaska Native, know how to message to African American, know how to message rural white questioning, and know how to reach the Latino community. And fortunately enough, thank you, Trump won. We had enough money to spend on advertising to reach people with the frequency that impacted their head. So many people like this wanted to, send a tweet and the world's going to be saved. No, it doesn't work that way. You gotta reach these people 15 times, roughly, before it even goes into the head, and now once it's in the head, it's like, I got to think about it. And when I go to the Walgreens, if it's not available, you just spent a lot of money getting a person to get into a car, go to Walgreens, CVS, every other pharmacy, not picking on one here. And it's not available, you've lost that. You just lost the opportunity. And it was a national emergency. So we were learning about vaccines as quickly as the world was learning about vaccines. And we're learning more now, and there's different opinions about that. And I, as a health educator, I love it. People are like, you what? I'm like, no. As a health educator, I love an engaged public, people who ask questions. If they just follow orders, they're just like the lemmings over the cliff, and Americans typically don't like their government telling them what to do, but some do and others don't. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, targeting really smart people who know about messaging, having the resources to compete with Budweiser and Coke and Pepsi in a marketplace where you're getting thousands of advertisements a day. And one of the unintended lessons learned, and I've actually written about this and I've written about all of it now, but it's like working with the budget office, because the budget people, they're not communications people, they're budget people. And they're like, and they went to the other classes in Pamplin. It was like, the left right accounting tables, and that's what that's very important part of this work. But until the budget people understand what it takes to communicate, they have their own ideas about how much money it would cost. So we had the opportunity, based on previous experience, to estimate a budget, to assemble an amazing team of people. The crisis I mentioned earlier, the country has to be in a crisis before it takes action. The crisis that motivated a touching moment for me, the contracting office. Oh my gosh, they used to, the thorn in my side. But I'm like, the contracting office saw this as their opportunity. This is a bigger alignment comment. This is the way they could contribute to solving or making less bad this huge international global crisis. So even the procurement people were like, how can we help move this forward? And so I don't ever want the opportunity again, because I don't ever want another global pandemic. But I was asked to do this, and I'm just like, this is essentially what we did. We got the money, made the case, smart people, and turn up the volume. And people showed up for shots. And because of systems in place, when people went for those shots, they were available. Nothing's worse than going to get something you think and it's not available. And if you can't, and I know that was a huge effort, thousands of people, millions, and my slice of the pie was the communications part. And so that's what I, quick version of the story. All details are published in the Journal of Health Communications if you ever want to study it. And I'm always interested in sharing a lot of details, but that's, I think it was the movable middle concept that helped people understand what communications can do and what it can't do. And it was a strategic choice to target that group, which thank goodness ended up being a smart choice. Yeah. Of course, maybe we could have gotten to 70 million. I don't know, but I'm rolling with the 60, and it really is like 55.9 million, the calculus or the calculation. But anyway, I think that helped people understand, again, communications, what communications can do, communications alone can do, communications and partners can do more, and how to use that tool to achieve a programmatic objective. Shots.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of these techniques, talks about working with the budget, relate back to your initial experience with your HIV/AIDS prevention?
Yes. That's sounds like, I will say we had a very limited budget. And as a student, I wasn't nearly that sophisticated at that point in time around going to the budget people. So the budget we had is what was given to us. But we tried to be, very smart. We were very smart, or tried to be very smart about how we use that budget. And like I said, the documentation exists on how we did the campaign on a shoestring budget. And now I'm having fun. Imagine if we had gotten a lot of money. Who knows what we could have done. We may have been more successful, or we may have had the same success rate, because few things get more done than a motivated college nurse. But I lay all success on, Joanne, her leadership, as again, the nurse from the Student Health Center who It was just, her passion drove this, but again, university support. So, but, but again, what we did, our messaging and work like that was informed by the work I did with the support of the marketing department and folks at Pamplin. Oh my goodness, a whole nother page.
It's just more information.
It's got good. Fine.
I only have a few more questions.
Okay.
So I was wondering, what would you like younger people that are current students at Virginia Tech to know about? Like, what would you want them to take away from your experiences as a queer student at Virginia Tech?
Loaded question. I don't want to be overly simplified, but we largely determine our own destination. And if individuals allow themselves to explore their possibilities, you don't have to share it with anybody, but in your head, what do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life? You can go for it and you might get there. But if you don't try and, fall victim to circumstances, it's going to be harder. But it's like, I'm convinced, and it's like, we'll never be able to figure this out, yes or no. But it's like, everyone has a vision of what they want for their life. And until you're honest with yourself and then put in the work, don't wait for the lottery ticket or the inheritance. There are ways to accomplish amazing things in this country, but it takes work. And I wrote a little piece recently. It's a book that was published by a grad from Virginia Tech called The Intentional Life, available on Amazon, online bookstores. We don't want to endorse any again, but anyway, Intentional Life. And the book has 365 different sort of one-page stories, and I have two in there, but one of them is it's called, the title's You're Lucky. And it goes back to people telling me, you're lucky you can retire. And I was like, well, yeah, luck has something to do with it, but it's called Take the Risk and Do the Work and focus on the goal, the positive, what do you want to be? So, and then luck comes into play, so that is, we, seriously, we are our own destinies. We all operate in an environment that is not supportive, there will be barriers. So, and life is not all, rainbows and puppies, and being sad and not happy is part of life, and embrace that, because there's also a learning there. And so not everybody starts at the same place. The start line is staggered for all of us, and there's groups of us around that stagger. So, but that environment should not. The environment should be taken advantage of, not used to limit. And it's all hard work. And if you think there's an easy way, keep playing the Powerball. But it's doing the work to do it. And another thing that I have found, and this is sort of a cliche thing, don't ever accept no from someone who can't tell you yes. It's like, because the world is full of no people. It's like, you can't no. Well, can you tell me yes? No. It's like, well, I'm talking to the wrong person. So it's like, think that through, and don't always assume the worst. It's like, just take a step back in life situations and think through things a little bit. You can't, if you spend your whole time thinking, you're never going to get anywhere. But take the risk, learn, move forward.
I do have another question.
Okay.
What would you say to students that are struggling with fear around taking that risk?
Find the source of the fear.
Mm.
Is the fear in your head? Because fear is a personal feeling. So what is out there that's creating that fear? And what, assuming it's real, because most of what we fear is not real and never even going to happen. But just take the time to examine that fear and where it's coming from. Because if you are afraid, you are afraid. Do not want to suggest you are not afraid, but take time to think about it, and how is not thinking about it impacting your ability to get to that, what you really want to be. And I know you already know it. You may not tell me, but you know it in your head what you want to do. And you might change courses, but yeah, think about the fear. Where is it coming from? And I recently had a conversation where an individual said, "We are not invited because we are trans." And I'm like, let's think about this. Are you not invited because you're trans, or are you not invited because somebody's afraid of what might happen? And we sort of teased it out. It's not because they're trans. It's the individuals who can say yes versus only no. We're afraid what might happen. So I'm like, let's not make an enemy out of a friend. They're afraid. It's not you can't go because you're trans. It's because they're afraid. And sometimes they don't understand trans, and that feeds into the fear. But in this particular case, the person's fine, but they were just afraid of what might happen. So fear is something to be contained and used to empower and not to be dismissed 100%, but something to examine and look through.
When you say, okay, give me a second. When you say the phrase, can they say yes to you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you further talk about that? Explain it a little bit more.
I'm going to have a fun time with this in a current situation. So, and I feel that it's also part of this project. It's important to document what's going on at Virginia Tech right now. And so there was a decision made at Virginia Tech to eliminate two scientific communities, Lavender House and Ujima. And I'm like, and I understand decisions need to be made for all sorts of reasons. But from what I understand, these decisions at best are a result of a bumbling bureaucracy. At worst, it is an aggressive target, a hostile act towards African American and LGBTQIA plus students. Because Lavender and Ujima provide a space where the university says and has documented better grades, fewer conduct problems, and connections with faculty and staff. These are the facts Virginia Tech outlines. And current students are really disappointed that the ones who wanted to live in these communities next year don't have that option now. They also, and I don't like it, but I love it, is like they're worried about students in the future because they're like, I don't know what I would have done without lavender. Parents who are contemplating supporting their children coming to this university, and it doesn't matter what their children are, they're but some of these children may want to live in Ujima or Lavender. They're worried, is this place safe for their child? Nothing worse than, a parent who fears for the safety for their child. And, I'm just like, you don't go there. Um, and and so I've met with students, I've met with program leadership, I've met with other university community members, and I personally have come to the conclusion that there is a best case scenario, and that it's a bumbling bureaucracy that really didn't take into consideration the impact on students, or it's a hostile act towards these students. And, and everybody, there's a center that has been identified as the decision maker. Well, that's BS. Not a big place like this, not one person makes that decision in this particular environment. But that person also, should have an opportunity to share their perspective. And so Virginia Tech doesn't worry me. This place is going to keep on going. They've, more people are applying here than they know what to do with, and, overwhelming the town, and bazillions, football teams not doing well. And, it's like, I get it. It's a big machine. But, hearing those students and hearing those program folks who were not part of the decision has kept me up at night. It wakes me up at night, and I'm not special about it. I'm just like, this is wrong. And especially because of such strong feelings without an opportunity to engage. And sometimes the opportunity to engage allows for better understanding when a decision has to be made. But now, like I said, I have a range I'm working with. But as I have pursued the avenues I have chosen to pursue around trying to get Virginia Tech to reconsider this decision with an intentional, authentic public engagement process, not a fake one. Big bureaucracies are good at, we'll talk to our three friends and we'll write a report, and look, see, they all say this is a bad idea. Not that I've ever done anything like that, but anyway, an authentic engagement process with these community leaders, and have the opportunity to understand the actual impact. I mean, what I've heard is emotional. What I've read is factual from Virginia Tech, the advantages of these communities. I mean, we're here to support student success. These learning living communities certainly do that. I'm like, so why would you take it away? And in the process, I've been like, I'm not going to take no from someone who can't tell me yes. And so I've kept going. I've escalated this, and I really hope to make some people around here feel uncomfortable. And I really hope they revisit the decision with an authentic public engagement process so that they better understand and can document the decision in a way they can be proud of and support. So if everything I've heard is all emotional and, people are going to survive anyway, then so be it. Put out a press release, be proud of your decision. But if there is something and they really are taking away an opportunity for students who might not have that same supportive environment, then admit it. We made a mistake. We were a bumbling bureaucracy and we could have done this better. I'll write the talking points, and so I'm working on finding, I think I know the yes person, and I have engaged the yes person. And there's another yes person that I have not engaged yet. But you can't play all the cards one time. I'm not gonna be a one-hit wonder here. And with that said, I've shared with people, there's a Mark Weber 6-month relationship with Virginia Tech, and then there's a Mark Weber 40-year relationship with Virginia Tech. So let's focus on the 40 years of change and figure out what we're going to do with this recent decision that the best information I have available now is having a negative impact on students' ability to succeed. And the only thing they're asking for is they want to pay more money to live in a place that's supportive. And it's tarnishing the university's reputation. Maybe not with everybody, but in the long term, yes, this will always be remembered as an era where regressive policies were put into place by this university. And that's really, that's sad given all the progress that has been made here. And I walked you through it, as exclusion, discrimination, toleration, acceptance, celebration. You get a lot further in this world as a, world-renowned land-grant university by celebrating your students versus punishing students who are trying to get ahead. That's where it revolves. And no one's been able to come up with a case otherwise, and so I'm challenging those people who can say yes to come up with that better reason and share that openly, honestly, and with pride. And there are tough decisions in this world, but own it, don't hide. And right now, Virginia Tech's hiding, and that's not cool. But again, I focus on the 40 years, and I really, I will also say, I'm confident that the people who made the decisions probably really didn't want to make them, but our environment is creating a situation where, I'm trying not to be judgmental here, but where they've made a bad decision when it comes to students in an effort to protect the university. I mean, and that's what's happening here too. Again, my opinion, it's you have to balance protecting the university so that it exists for students, but the long-term success approach Virginia Tech is building the best students in the world. And what is it that they need to be successful in delivering that? And that will ultimately protect the university.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I also just really want to thank you for your advocacy on behalf of students. I really appreciate that.
That's why I keep coming back.
Thank you.
I just went up to the Pride Center. I'm like making sure it's still there.
Yeah. Okay. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything throughout this interview that you wanted to talk about that I didn't think of, or would you like to go back to?
No.
Okay.
You did an excellent job. And
Thank
I'm
you.
like, I want to end with that last yes and no. I was like, oh my gosh, that thank you for setting that up. I was lucky because I was prepared.
Thank you.
We're good.